Number 10. Go pills. Introducing Go pills, the pill that keeps you up for 40 hours straight. What could possibly go wrong? When the government tried creating these new pills, the right idea was in mind. Or so we think. Overnight workers, military, maybe you need to cram 3 days of studying in one night. You name it. The US Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, was supposed to have your back. What happened? The Air Force has around 100 fatal crashes on record because of fatigued pilots. So US military was actively trying to create a solution for these physically demanding jobs. The closest that we have now to these Go pills are something called modafinil, which is a narcotic approved by the Air Force to combat said fatigue, but it's not public yet, of course, obviously. Do you think these government Go pills will ever make it to the public? I mean, I think coffee makes people crazy enough in the mornings. I'm all set personally. I'm on like coffee number 4. I'm jazzed up right now. Number 9, the heart attack gun. Sounds like a pretty calm weapon right there. The CIA had this weapon and it was more of a dart gun than anything, but you know, heart attack gun sounds pretty on the nose for this list. It shot a frozen dart filled with a specific toxin that, you guessed it, gave you a heart attack. Pretty James Bond, right? It was frozen so that the dart would ideally melt away after it's done its damage. You know, destroying all the evidence, right? It's like some icicle killer stuff right there. That's some next level. There we go. It took me 17 seconds to remember what an icicle was called. I was like, what are those long drippy frozen things? The icicles. The CIA was really into poisons during the Cold War and apparently darts. Match made in heaven. The public caught wind of all this thanks to Senator Frank Church, and when Congress decided to look into where these tax dollars were going, they found a plethora of illegal methods used by not only the CIA, but also the NSA and the FBI and the IRS. A lot of letters coming in, a lot of sketchy letters. Frozen darts, that's insane. That's a confusing way to go out. You'd have no idea what happened. You'd be like, ugh, brr. Ow. Like, it'd be that fast. That's crazy. Number 8, Project Iceworm. Ooh, speaking of cold, here we go. Back in the 1960s, under the Greenland ice sheet, the US Army started to build a mobile nuclear missile launch site, okay? It was codenamed Project Iceworm. It's a pretty fun name because it's cold and underground. We get it, right? Nice. The idea was that they would build the station close enough so that they could hit targets within the Soviet Union, all secretly, right? That was the whole idea. This project was called Project Iceworm, but there was another project called Camp Century that had to be done first. This is the top secret, sketchy stuff. Can't just hit the road with a few shovels, you gotta make sure it's livable first. Camp Century was a network of underground tunnels and places for workers to hang out, like a kitchen, a hall, supply rooms, communication center, all stuff like that. It was a supply camp. You know, whatever you imagine, it was that. There was also a nuclear power plant. That's the most important part, to keep everything active, right? This was kept from the Danish government for 7 years. A secret nuclear power plant for 7 years. Yeah, we don't like those. But in 1966, the project was canceled because of shifting ice. Or at least that's what they say. No, it's definitely shifting ice. The whole place is melted by now. Number 7, leaked voters. Back in December 2015, personal information from 191 million voters was leaked to the public online. It happened very fast. This feels like yesterday. I remember this happening online. I was actually quite worried about it. Researcher Chris Vickery found this data while conducting a security investigation. See, Forbes had described Vickery as, well, dare I say, a good hacker, for lack of a better word. They're called white hat hackers. They find weak spots in security without sabotaging or exploiting them. You know, they're not villains. They're just like, oh, check this file, gotcha. They're nice, that's key. We need that. That's the difference. 79% of those eligible to vote were the victims in this leak. All their names, addresses, birth date, phone numbers, emails, even photos, you name it. Things you don't want people knowing, let alone third parties online. It's now out there. We're still unsure who was behind this entire leak, so that's comforting to go to sleep to, knowing. CSO Online and databreaches.net suggest that the information more than likely came from a software provider called Nation Builder. But CEO Jim Gilliam announced that that was not the case and they did not create the database. He said, nope, false. Although he conceded that it is still possible that some of the information that it contains may have come from data that they make available for free to campaigns. So a third party took what they could and really ran with it. It wasn't them, it was just their weak security. Nice, we love that. Just my photo, just in someone's Google Doc. I'm like, awesome. I don't want anything out there. I don't want my Google search history out there. That sounds suspicious. Number 6, the Space Cube. In honor of Jordan Peele's new space movie coming out called Nope, we have to include some alien cover-ups in this government list. Not too long ago, this spinning cube-looking drone, hopefully drone, was spotted over Missouri, and then only a couple hours later, it was seen again 700 miles away. That's a pretty far distance. That's a fast travel time. What's your secret? 44-year-old Matthew Jandeka was minding his own business, hanging out on the porch, when this caught his attention. It was a sunny day, so the light reflected off the cube and it caught his eye. But then a day later, another guy, 30-year-old Justin Johnson, he saw the same exact thing in the sky. He saw it while he was driving home. The light and the reflection, same thing, caught his eye. At first, I thought maybe it was a balloon, but the movements were odd, he said. Well, it sounds like whatever this thing is, military aircraft, drone, whatever the case, it's pretty fast. Maybe they're filming Top Gun 3, who knows? No spoilers. Number 5. Surtsey Island. Some islands are forbidden, like Heard Island. They're home to animals and wildlife that the government refuses to let humans be part of, which is sketchy in its own way. A lot of Jurassic Park vibes over there. But when it comes to Surtsey Island, near Iceland, again, always Iceland, hiding secret government projects, well, Surtsey Island is a brand new island. We love it. Literally, this island formed from a volcanic eruption back in 1963, so scientists are using this fresh face of Earth to study what it looks like to not have humans in the picture for a change. Yeah, we have seed vaults, a forbidden island. These projects make people uneasy, hence why the government tries to keep them low-key. That is until I come out and then loudly announce it, and then tell you to hit that like button. Awesome. Number 4, WikiLeaks war log. Companies have to live somewhere, right? We're a film studio in Toronto, we're a place. We're not just a bunker, right? We're like an establishment. There's windows, we have a fridge, lots of coffee, we're okay. But where do places like WikiLeaks work? It's probably a sketchy establishment. It's probably nothing like Google, you know what I'm saying? Not a lot of beanbag chairs going on at WikiLeaks. Probably just one chair that everyone shares. Just one guy. It's literally just one guy. Today, it's a facility owned by Swedish internet provider Bahnhof. This is where they keep servers for WikiLeaks. Julian Assange was the front runner for this whole operation, so literally, like I said, it was one guy. His hard drive is stored in this bunker behind a 2-foot steel door accompanied by numerous backup generators. So you're not getting in, pal. In October 2010, WikiLeaks actually published Army field reports from 2004. It's now one of the biggest leaks in US history. This report confirmed that there were over 66,000 civilian deaths in the Iraqi war logs out of the 109,000 in total. This leak also suggested that some American troops were classifying civilians as enemies in their statistics. Yeah, which is not great. That's a borderline. That's a big leak. These numbers were from 2004 to 2009 alone. Yeah, it's hard stuff. Number 3, military weapons. Getting into the alien stuff, here we go. Psycho-electronic weapons. Yeah, apparently we're in a DC comic now. We have ice darts, ice rays. What's going on here? The first time Curtis Waltman heard of these military psycho-electronic weapons was when he received documents via Yahoo. Of all the places to get documents, you're like, oh. This is 10 years old. Originally, he had filed the Freedom of Information Act request to Washington State Fusion Center. He was trying to find out more on the clashes between Antifa and the far right. But instead he got a response and it was all about experimental weapons. He's like, this is not what I asked for. What is this? Open. The guy gets a zip file back in return and it's called EM Effects on Human Body. How do you not open that, right? And that's exactly what he did. He opened this file because, of course, and in it he saw diagrams on these weapons and the effects that they have on people. Muscle quaking, body pain, just shivering, just your body shuts down. It's horrible. One of the effects allowed users to control their dreams. So it's not all bad, it's just kind of not right, unethical. This was clearly sent by mistake. Nobody should ever know about any of these weapons, these super dream weapons. I don't even know what's going on there. The only emails I get are from student loans. Those ones are not a mistake. Those ones I will keep deleting. Number 2, inner armor. Not to be confused with your inner ninja. It's also pretty mighty. We've all wanted to be a superhero at some point, okay? I'm always late. I would love super speed. Any day, that'd be great. Well, DARPA's Inner Armor project almost made a dream come true. It was the Pentagon's way of creating super soldiers. Yeah, like Iron Man, they were literally working on this. Scientists use animals as a reference for these new abilities, literally like from a Marvel movie. They're studying the DNA of the stellar sea lion because it can reduce blood flow away from organs if need be, in order to reduce oxygen demand. So now we're studying that to try and make, I don't know, people like Atlanteans? Where are we going here? That would be sweet. Just Aquaman with a tactical vest and a spear. Okay, that's sure. Dr. Michael Callahan, who is in charge of running the operation, he says the goal was to make soldiers kill-proof against disease, chemical weapons, radioactive weapons, harsh weather conditions, you name it, all that good stuff. Pretty much invincible. Now, this was back in 2007, and of course in 2014, Barack Obama announced that the United States was still building Iron Man. So maybe they're close. Maybe they haven't done it yet. Who knows? Honestly, I'm seeing videos every day of like these guys on hoverboards whipping down New York. We're so close to the Green Goblin in real life. We're f***ed. Or like the water pier guy, he like uses the water to float. That's like two villains. It's two villains right there in real life. And finally, number 1, MK Ultra. We have to finish with a mind control project. It's the only way, of course. MK Ultra was a secret CIA project that lasted from 1953 to 1973. It's a long time. They ran hundreds of experiments to US citizens. They gave them illicit substances and other narcotics, just horrible stuff, all in attempts to crack mind control. Or as they call it, information gathering. Mind control. It's definitely mind control. In the 50s and 60s, around the Cold War, the United States believed that the Soviets, Chinese, and/or North Korean agents were all using mind control in the war. I mean, how else could you explain brainwashed prisoners of war in Korea, right? Nothing to do with what they're doing to them. Sure. The program had subjects take LSD, hallucinogens, paralytics, electric shock therapy, horrible stuff, just being put through the absolute worst, all in places like universities or hospitals or even prisons, right? You have no idea this stuff's happening. The happenings of these projects weren't fully known to the public until years after it ended. But the agency destroyed most MK documents back in 1973 when the whistle was blown, so we think we know, but in reality, we only know little to what happened during MK Ultra.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Salem UFO. On the morning of July 16th, 1952, this photo was captured by Shell Alpert and has stumped people ever since. The photo shows 4 unidentified objects hovering in the air above Salem, Massachusetts, and was taken at the Salem Coast Guard Air Station. The objects seem to be above the Winter Island and Cat Cove areas, but there really isn't much more that is known about this strange incident. There are a few theories regarding this photo. One is a camera glitch, others think it may just be light reflecting off of the window that the photo was taken through, but of course there are people who point to similar incidents that happened in the 1950s, and of course believe it is proof of extraterrestrial beings. It is very likely we may never know exactly what's going on here, but the air of mystery it leaves is definitely kind of cool. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Frozen Man of Mount Everest. This photo comes from 1996 and it shows Beck Weathers getting treated after the Mount Everest disaster. The Mount Everest disaster took place on May 10th and 11th in 1996, where there was a blizzard on the mountain that ended up stranding and taking the lives of 8 people who were aiming to descend the mountain. Beck was a part of the team who was climbing the mountain on this fateful day, and he ended up suffering from snow blindness during the climb. He actually fell into a hypothermic coma because it was so cold, and he suffered severe frostbite on his face, hands, and feet. Pretty miraculously, he not only survived, but ended up walking back down to camp in order to get help, where he was then taken by helicopter to receive treatment. He ended up needing his hands, parts of his feet, and even his nose amputated, but he survived this whole ordeal, and that is the most important thing. In our number 8 spot today, we have the reflecting pool. This is one of the creepiest or most chilling images ever taken. It depicts a young girl in a graveyard who is looking down at a reflection in a pond. Okay, maybe a little eerie, but not exactly chilling. What makes this photo what it is, however, is that there are seemingly 2 reflections looking back up at this little girl. No one knows who this girl is, where she is, or even when this photo was taken, but it is estimated to have come from somewhere around the early 1900s. This photo was analyzed and it has been said that it is unaltered or edited. Who knows how this photo was possible? Maybe there was some sort of invisible entity standing beside her that we could only see the reflection of, like a reverse vampire or something. In our number 7 spot today, we have the elephant's foot. This photo looks like it's just a big lump of nothing, but it is called an elephant's foot. No, it's of course not a real elephant's foot, and instead is just called that because of its appearance. This lump was actually created from the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown, and it is just a mass of corium and other materials that were in the core of the reactor. This elephant's foot was located in the steam distribution corridor, which is under what's left of the reactor. While this mass doesn't produce as much radiation as it did before, it does still produce a deadly amount even today. Like, so much so that just a few minutes of being around it is enough to get a lethal dose of radiation. It's kind of crazy that even though they knew this, they were still standing there taking pictures of it. For a long time, the severity of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster was being kept a secret from the public and those who it mattered to the most. Photos like these only give us a glimpse into this horrible disaster and how things went down. In our number 6 spot today, we have the penitentiary. This photo comes from what is left of the the Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. This prison used to be the most famous and the most expensive in the world, but now this is the sort of thing that is left of it. This prison is actually now used as a tourist attraction, and it becomes a haunted house during Halloween. The prison used to house some pretty high-profile prisoners, such as Scarface himself, Al Capone. The prison was opened in 1829 and was known for its advanced technology for the time. They had things like central heating, flush toilets, and shower baths in each cell. These were all considered luxuries in 1829. The first prisoner to be held there was Charles Williams, who was facing a 2-year sentence for theft. When he arrived at the prison, he had a hood over his head so as to protect his identity, but also so that he wouldn't know what the rest of the prison looked like, so he would never be able to plan an escape. While prison is never good, the craziest thing about this specific one is that all of the prisoners lived in isolation. I can't even imagine what that would be like, especially for the people who found themselves there for a long period of time. This photo is just a truly haunting reminder of all that once went on in this prison. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Stanford Prison Experiment. This photo comes from 1971 during the Stanford Prison Experiment. For those of you who aren't familiar with this experiment, it started on August 14th, 1971 and was led by university psychology professor Philip Zimbardo. The experiment took student volunteers and divided them into 2 groups, one group of prisoners and one group of guards, and they placed all of the volunteers into a fake prison that was created for this experiment. The experiment aimed to see if and how quickly humans would turn evil under the right conditions with the right amount of power. Basically, it was a test to try and answer the question of if humans are inherently good or inherently evil. I think everyone was pretty shocked with the results. After just 6 days, the experiment needed to be concluded because the guards began absolutely tormenting the prisoners. It really showed the kinds of things humans can be capable of, even after a short time. This photo is definitely reminiscent of that experiment, and it serves as our reminder. In our number 4 spot today, we have the acid drum. This photo comes to us from the inside of a house of one of the most terrible people, the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. This photo was taken from the inside of his home after he was found and caught by authorities. Before his arrest, he was sadly able to take the lives of 17 people. Although this photo might look kind of plain, the horrors are plentiful. This shot shows a full drum of acid that was located inside of his home. I probably don't need to tell you what it was used for, because who has a full drum of acid inside of their home? Especially when you're a serial killer. I can't imagine the horrors investigators saw when they entered his home, and even previous to that as they investigated his crimes. Thankfully, Jeffrey was caught, and in 1992 he was sentenced to life in prison, but just 2 years later he was killed by a fellow prison inmate. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Gadget. This photo shows the first ever atomic bomb, and it comes to us from 1945. Called the Gadget, this bomb was an implosion plutonium device that was detonated in the Trinity test in 1945. This photo shows someone sitting next to it, so casually, like it's a stuffed animal and not like it's a world-changing device. The Trinity test was the very first time a nuclear weapon was detonated, and the Gadget was actually of the same design as the bomb that was later detonated over Nagasaki, Japan on August 9th, 1945. There is a very eerie nature about this photo and the seemingly casual behavior of the man next to it. Did he know what this was about to unleash? Perhaps not, but more eerily, maybe he did. In our number 2 spot today, we have Change. This photo was taken by Fred Blackwell on May 28th, 1963, and is actually showing us a moment of protest. The 3 sitting at the counter are Joan Trompour, Anne Moody, and their sociology teacher, John Salter. The reason why this photo is so important is because these 3 are sitting at a quote white-only counter at Woolworth's 5 and Dime store in Jackson, Mississippi, while being attacked by an angry mob. People are throwing condiments at them, and I'm sure saying some pretty nasty things. The 2 students went to Tougaloo College, which was a black college that ended up being at the core of the civil rights movement in Mississippi. It's amazing to see how brave they are, and a photo like this is really such an important message for us to remember today. In our number 1 spot today, we have Bikini Island. Bikini in the Marshall Islands was once inhabited by around 170 islanders until 1945 rolled around. The US president at the time, Harry Truman, ordered that the military continue to test nuclear weapons just in case they were needed in the future, here, since this was shortly after the end of World War II. Unfortunately, Bikini was the place that was chosen to be the testing site, since all planes and ships traveled on routes that weren't close to the area. The residents of the island were asked to vacate, quote, for the good of mankind and to end all world wars, to which they of course obliged, under the impression that they would one day be able to move back. Test weapons were detonated on the reef itself, on the sea, in the air, and underwater, and this photo shows what was happening during just one of these tests, and it wasn't even the largest one. Although the former residents of Bikini were promised that they would one day be able to return home, the island still remains uninhabited because of the mass amounts of radiation that still exist here. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have a pile of bones. During the 19th century, bison were hunted so much that they were actually quite close to being extinct, and by the mid-1880s there were only a few hundred left. Hides were prepared and then shipped off so that they could be made into leather, but usually the bones, or really anything other than the hide, was just left to decay, as it wasn't useful to the hunters. The hunting of bison was so widespread and overwhelming that even the US Army sanctioned and endorsed the slaughter of herds of bison. The federal government was promoting it for a variety of reasons, including to lessen a food and material source for the indigenous peoples. The US government was even paying a bounty for each bison skull, and military commanders were ordering troops to kill bison, not for them to eat, but just so that the indigenous couldn't. That story, coupled with the sheer mass amounts of skulls seen in this photo, is exactly what makes it so exceptionally unsettling. These bones would likely be on their way to become fertilizer. In our number 9 spot today we have the Great Manta. In 1933, a New York silk manufacturer named A.L. Kahn was on a nice little vacation in Florida when he honestly accidentally caught something remarkable. His anchor line, by mistake, caught onto a giant manta ray. After a struggle and several hours, Kahn was able to get this actually enormous fish ashore. This monster was somewhere between 5,000 to 6,000 pounds and was 20 feet and 5 inches in width. For reference, there are other giant manta rays, but they usually grow to be around 13 to 14 feet wide, not 20 and a half. This photo is showing a taxidermy version of the fish, which Kahn used to bring around to exhibitions to show off his accidental catch. In an article from the December 10th, 1933 issue of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch's Sunday magazine, Kahn is quoted as saying, quote, fishing is a lot of fun when you catch the fish. And sometimes it's fun even when you don't, but when the fish catches you. In our number 8 spot today we have the swimsuits. This is a photo that comes to us from the 1920s, and it shows just one of the many extremely important jobs that the quote beach patrol of the day had. Yes, they went around measuring the length between a woman's knee and the bottom of her swimsuit because God forbid she showed too much leg at the beach. In the 1920s, bathing suits began to become something that went through changes and fads, and of course this evolution to more form-fitting, less material swimwear caused a lot of controversy in the day. There were then strict dress codes implemented at places like resorts and country clubs, and even directors of public beaches had them, thus the beach patrol. There were fines for violations and sometimes even imprisonment. In the Washington Post in 1907, there was a photo of 2 women in bathing suits being escorted by an officer with a caption, quote, these apologies for skirts endanger the morals of the children. The police must interfere and stop the outrageous proceedings. In most cases, these sorts of rules really only affected the women of the time, and sometimes women were even required to wear stockings under their bathing suits. I'm just saying, with my attitude, I would have not done well in the 1920s. There was even one beach who had a tailor go around and stitch up swimsuits that they felt weren't up to the dress code. In our number 7 spot today we have the advertisement. This is a photo that comes to us from a time of World War II, and it shows a terrifying ad. The sign reads, these men didn't take their atabrine, and at first I had absolutely no idea what that was. Turns out atabrine is the first synthetic form of quinine, which was used by the US military to fight malaria in the South Pacific during the war. It is estimated that as many as 2/3 of the troop fell ill with malaria. This sign is said to have been posted outside of a military hospital in New Guinea and was meant to serve as a warning for those who didn't take the medicine, warning that the skulls on top would be the fate that awaited them. Perhaps a little dark, but creative and likely effective nonetheless. At the very least, the ad is quite clear. In our number 6 spot today we have the Ferris Wheel of Hate. This is a photo that, honestly, I don't even know what to say about it. It's gross, it's weird, it's upsetting, and it's honestly just so stupid. For a long time this photo went under the radar as the photographer who took it didn't share it with the paper, but when it resurfaced 65 years later, it spread like wildfire, and for a lot different reasons than it would have back then, thankfully, but it also reveals some of those blind spots in history that we have. This photo comes from April of 1926 and it shows some members of the KKK just enjoying a day at an amusement park with many of them on a Ferris wheel. I wish this was one of those times where something went horribly wrong and the whole thing came crashing down, but unfortunately that likely isn't what happened on this day, and now we just have this relic that shows us the insane power and influence that this hate group had during this time. While this photo is very dark, it's an important part of history to remember. Also, before we move on, let's just take a second to talk about how stupid they all look. Like, we gotta wear our little matching outfits to the Ferris wheel. In our number 5 spot today, we have early plastic surgery. This photo, well, rather these two photos side by side, show a man named Walter Yeo, and he was the first person to receive the, at the time advanced, plastic surgery procedure called the skin flap. Sounds disgusting. He received this procedure in 1917, and at the time, since it was so advanced, it was only used for very serious things, like for someone who was wounded in battle, which is exactly what had happened to Walter. He was a soldier in the Battle of Jutland during the First World War. Walter was actually a sailor, and he was manning the guns aboard the HMS Warspite, and while doing this, he sustained facial injuries that included the loss of his upper and lower eyelids. In the end, he needed a couple more operations, but he was even able to return to service for a little while before being medically discharged. After this, he lived his life until he reached the age of 70 years old. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Hindenburg. This is a photo that was taken during what is now known as the Hindenburg disaster. It is commonly known that blimps, or these kinds of floating airships, use helium in them to float through the air, and it's important to note that this helium isn't the choice because it's the only option, but rather it's one of the safest options because it isn't extremely volatile. Because of a US ban on the exportation of helium at the time, i.e. the Helium Control Act of 1925, although the Hindenburg was designed to use helium, because of a lack of it available, on the day of the Hindenburg disaster, the much more flammable hydrogen was used instead. This led to a complete disaster. When the Hindenburg floated off on May 6, 1937, it disastrously caught fire during its flight with 97 people on board. Sadly, due to the fire, there were 35 casualties on board the flight that day. It is an absolutely horrendous situation, but it does teach us all a very valuable lesson. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Falls. This is a photo of Annie Edison Taylor when she was 63 years old in 1901. The barrel she is posing beside is the one that she sealed herself up inside of to then become the first person to survive a trip over Niagara Falls. Why did she do this? Well, for money, of course. Annie was widowed and spent a lot of time bouncing between different jobs, but after having been burned out of her home and losing money that she had invested with a clergyman, she ended up sadly falling on some hard times, and this is what led her to the Falls. The barrel she used was custom made, and it was constructed of oak and iron and padded with a mattress. It wasn't exactly easy to get this whole plan set up, and it ended up being delayed several times, mostly because people were afraid to be a part of this mission that was likely sending Annie to her death, and I truly don't blame them at all. On October 24th, 1901, her 63rd birthday, Annie climbed in the barrel with her heart-shaped pillow and was set adrift. The river currents carried the barrel over the Canadian Horseshoe Falls, and rescuers reached her barrel shortly after. She was alive and escaped with little to no injuries aside from a gash on her head. While her survival is great news, it's important to include what Annie had to say about the entire situation after, which was, quote, "If it was with my dying breath, I would caution anyone against attempting the feat. I would sooner walk up to the mouth of a cannon knowing it was going to blow me to pieces than make another trip over the falls." So don't try this at home, is what she's saying. In our number 2 spot today, we have War is Hell. This is a photo of a soldier that was taken during the Vietnam War. The soldier has a hand-scribed note on their helmet that reads, quote, "War is hell," and I truly cannot even imagine. In 1954, the US entered the war to support South Vietnam against the regime in North Vietnam, as well as their allies in the South. This war lasted for 2 decades and it claimed more than 3 million lives, mostly those of Vietnamese civilians. There are many many powerful, disturbing, and unsettling photos from this war, many of which I would consider too graphic to put here on YouTube. There's something about the brightness of the eyes of the soldier that sits in contrast with the rest of this dark photo that really make it stand out. For a while, the identity of this soldier was left a mystery, but after some years, Fran Chafin Morrison revealed that the soldier was her late husband, Larry Wayne Chaffin. Larry served for a year in the 173rd Brigade, beginning in May 1965, and when this photo was taken, he was just 19 years old. He did end up being discharged from the army and was able to return home to his wife. He sadly ended up passing away at the young age of 39, thought to be because of complications due to the exposure to Agent Orange, but his legacy has lived on. There's an incredible photo of his grandson who looks strikingly similar to his grandfather, holding this exact portrait. In our number 1 spot today, we have the cross. This photo comes to us from 1960 and it shows Martin Luther King Jr. along with his infant son at the time removing a cross that had been burnt on his front lawn. This photo is important and powerful for quite a few reasons. Firstly, it's just a glimpse into what Mr. King would have dealt with every single day for many years. It is clear by his almost nonchalant look that this isn't something new or surprising. It's also important to note, however, that this look isn't one of acceptance or content, or of someone who is unbothered, but instead it's the look of someone who continually chooses to rise above, someone who chooses to remain calm and cool in the face of adversity, the leader of a movement. As a Reddit user, 1945 Best Year put so well, quote, "Here he's a father, a man with a family whose lives are being threatened. He isn't hysterical or obviously afraid, and his towering figure literally rooting out the undesirable foe has been done in any number of war propaganda posters, but he's still sympathetic. He deserves the security of knowing that home will be safe for his children like anybody else."
Number 10. Sea Creature. Hook Island is off the coast of Queensland, Australia, and Robert Le Serac, his family, and a friend, Hank de Jong, stayed there for 3 months in late 1964. On December 12, 1964, the Le Seracs and Hank were crossing Stowhaven Bay on an island when Robert's wife noticed something odd in the water. It was a long, tadpole-like creature. It was black, and it was believed that it was at least 30 feet long. Robert and Hank decided to venture into the water and record it on film. When they entered the water, the monster was even bigger than they thought. But as they started recording, the creature opened its mouth and swam away. When they checked the film, they had no footage of the creature, but the pictures clearly showed it. The pictures were published in a magazine and eventually spread across the world, making it one of the most famous and unexplained pictures of a cryptid. Number 9. A spaceman? This is one of the world's most famous mysterious photos. The image was taken by Jim Templin near Solway Firth in Kernba, England in 1964. It is a simple photo of his daughter, but behind Jim's daughter, who was supposed to be the only figure in the picture, there is another entity resembling a spaceman. Jim insists he did not see anyone else present when the photograph was taken, so what's behind her? The image was reproduced widely in contemporary newspapers and gained the interest of UFOologists. Jim took the picture to the police in Carlisle, who, after many doubts, examined it and stated there was nothing suspicious about it. The local newspaper, the Cumberland News, picked up the story, and within hours it was all over the world. Regarding the photo, Jim said, "The picture is certainly not fake, and I am bemused as anyone else as to how this figure appeared in the background. Over the 4 decades the photo has been in the public domain, I have had many thousands of letters from all around the world with various ideas or possibilities, which most make little sense to me. Modern analysis suggests that the figure might have been the photographer's wife standing with her back towards the cameras, but not even this explanation is convincing enough." Number 8. Strange lights. Since the 1940s, and possibly even earlier, there has been a strange light phenomenon observed in Hessdalen Valley, Norway. The spectacle has a form of white or yellow light of unknown origin standing or floating above ground level. Between 1981 and 1984, the lights were observed up to 20 times per week, but have drastically reduced in frequency since then, about 10 to 20 times per year. Why the decrease all of a sudden? No one knows. No one knows where the lights come from, but UFO enthusiasts took this as a sign that the valley was a portal to other worlds. It wasn't just conspiracy theorists that were interested in this, as the strange bursts of light in the 1980s attracted physicists too. Interest piqued by the idea of some sort of explained natural phenomenon. In the decades since, scientists have determined the glow likely comes from air turned into plasma. Despite ongoing research and numerous working hypotheses, there is no convincing explanation for the origin of these lights and seems like it will always be a mystery. Number 7. Fairy circles. For those of you with trypophobia, look away. Found in the arid grasslands of the western part of South Africa, the fairy circles are circular patches of barren land. They typically occur in monospecific grassy vegetation, and the circles vary between 7 and 49 feet in diameter. Until 2014, the phenomenon was only known to occur in the western parts of southern Africa, but that year ecologists were alerted to similar rings of vegetation outside of Africa and a part of Pilbara in Western Australia. There are various myths about these fairy circles. One from Himba people say that these barren patches are said to have been caused by the gods, spirits, and natural divinities. Of specific beliefs, the Himba people note that their original ancestor, Merkuru, was responsible for the creation of the fairy circles, or that they were the footprints of gods. Another myth, promoted by some tour guides, is that the circles are formed by a dragon in the earth, and that its poisonous breath kills the vegetation. The origin and history of fairy circles have long been a puzzle, and even now, scientists are not sure who or what created them. One favorite assumption is that a sand termite is responsible for the circles, but the range of the phenomenon is much wider than that of termite species, so it's unknown. Number 6. Ghostly waters. In December 1924, James Courtney and Michael Meehan were crew members of the SS Watertown. While on the ship, they were cleaning a cargo tank of the oil tanker, and they were overcome by gas fumes, which resulted in both of their deaths. Due to this, the crew buried them in the sea, but to their astonishment, the ghostly faces of the soldiers appeared in the water the next day. Yeah, like in the waves. Later on, many crew members reported to see the faces as well. The faces were so visible that the captain of the ship ordered them to take a picture of them to have proof. You know, so people didn't think that they were all crazy. In the picture, you can clearly see two faces, and it's just plain creepy. When they returned to the land, the negative was even checked for fakery and proclaimed genuine. Number 5. Pyramid on the Moon. This is for all the people who believe that the moon is real. In December 1972, this image was taken by Apollo 17 in the area known as Geophone Rock. NASA listed the image as blank, but after retouching the photo, you can see that it's not completely blank. Turning up the contrast, a pyramidal structure can be seen. So what was it? Was it some malfunction of the camera, or is there actually a pyramid on the moon? NASA has never given a credible version of the issue, which has led some speculations about what else can actually be on the moon, hidden to public awareness. And listen, not to be a crazy conspiracy theorist, but maybe it's true that aliens built the pyramids on Earth, as it looks like they did on the moon too. NASA, please tell us the truth. Number 4. Figure climbing the stairs. Reverend Ralph Hardy, a retired clergyman from White Rock, British Columbia, took this famous photograph in 1966. Originally, he only wanted to take a picture of the elegant tulip staircase in the Queen's House section of the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, England. And I mean, I don't blame him, they're pretty. But upon development, the photo revealed a shrouded figure climbing the stairs. It's strange and unsettling, and Ralph says there was no one else in the frame when he took it. So, is it a ghost? That seems like the most reasonable explanation at this point. Experts who examined the original negative concluded that it had not been tampered with. The vicinity of the staircase is rumored to be haunted, and unexplained footsteps had often been heard there, so it could definitely be a ghost, but it's still very strange. Number 3. The Young Boy. One of the most famous haunted houses in the United States is the Dutch Colonial House at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York. The haunting stems from the night of November 13, 1974, when 23-year-old Ronald Defoe killed all 6 members of his family. He was then arrested, convicted, and given 6 concurrent life sentences. In December of 1975, George and Kathy Lutz, along with their 3 children, moved into the house and claimed that spooky things were happening. For example, George would wake up at 3 3:15 every morning, which was the approximate time that Ronald killed his family. Kathleen said she could feel a ghostly presence and be embraced by it. All of this and more caused the family to flee in fear after only staying in the house for 28 days. Due to this, demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren visited the house and set up time-lapse infrared cameras and caught this photo. This picture wasn't made public until 3 years later when George Litz appeared on the Merv Griffith Show in 1979. Believers of the haunting think that the photo is a ghost of the youngest Defoe son, John Matthew, who was 9 at the time of the Others believe it's a staged photo, but despite the controversy, this picture is one of the most frightening images from the Amityville Horror. Number 2. Man falling from the ceiling. Back in the 1950s, the Cooper family from Texas moved into their new house. Once there, they took a family photo. Normal, right? But when the picture was developed, the image of a body falling from the ceiling was clearly visible. To be clear, no one fell from the ceiling when they took the photo. So, what happened? As further investigation on this story has brought no plausible explanation, there exists many speculations, including one that argues that the shadow is the ghost of the previous owner of the house. But my question is, why is he falling from the ceiling, and why did he have to ruin that beautiful family photo? I remember seeing this photo on the internet when I was probably too young to see it, and after all these years, this image still gives me the chills. And number 1. A collection of things. I don't even know how to go on to describe this photo. It's a collection of things, but you can't really make out what any of the things are. At first glance it appears normal, but upon closer inspection it is incredibly difficult to make out any object, as everything is blurred to the point of being indistinct. Your brain is trying hard to grasp some sort of pattern to understand the context of the photo, and it looks so much like there is context to be found, but it's simply impossible. The photo is named Name One Thing in This Photo, and it was made by someone unknown. Many people have described this as what you see when you're having a stroke, but has not been released to what this is or why it was made. All I can say is that it makes me wildly uncomfortable, and I'd love it if it were deleted off the internet forever.
And now, coming in at number 10, UFOs. Do you guys remember in April of 2020 when the Pentagon released UFO videos? The videos, captured by naval aviators, show objects flying through the sky, one rotating against the wind, and the pilots can be heard just being completely flabbergasted. When they first appeared online, they breathed new life into the decades-long conversation about whether interstellar visitors had ever come to Earth, and extraterrestrial enthusiasts were more than a little excited about the whole thing. While the Pentagon has said that there are usually some more closer to home explanations for most occurrences like these, the Pentagon has never made any assertion about what exactly is going on in the videos. Recorded in 2004 and early 2015 over the Pacific and off the East Coast, they simply say that the phenomenon is unexplainable. I'm gonna go ahead and say that there's nothing that proves these are aliens, and that's why these particular videos were released in the first place. I'm sure they've got more substantial evidence of aliens hiding somewhere. Number 9. Tank Man. The Tiananmen Square protests were student-led demonstrations in 1989 calling for democracy, free speech, and a free press in China. The amount of protesters began reaching into the millions, and when martial law had not deterred them, the government became much more hostile. On June 4th, military personnel and police began to storm the square using live rounds, with hundreds of thousands of casualties and 10,000 arrests. A man on June 5th, though, was photographed standing alone against and on top of a massive tank in the infamous square, and that image has circulated around the world. But it's likely that many people in China itself haven't seen much of it. That's because every year on the anniversary of the massacre, the Chinese government puts a massive amount of effort into making sure that there is not even a mention of it in the media or on the internet, as if the government would prefer to just erase it from history altogether. Number 8. X-37 spaceplane. Once upon a time, one of the most secretive advanced US experimental aircraft, the X-37B spaceplane, landed at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and the government did not want many pictures taken. The funny thing is that there are actually a lot of pictures of this event and of the craft itself, but what it's being used for or what its missions have been is the part that no one really knows. The autonomously piloted aircraft had just spent 2 years in our Earth's orbit on a highly classified mission. The craft craft looks like a miniature space shuttle, and it is launched into orbit using a secondary vehicle. It has had a few missions that prove that it is useful as a reusable space vehicle, which is the whole thing, but we don't know exactly what its purpose is or what technology it contains. Okay, number 7, Pine Gap. A video like this would not be a video like this if it didn't include a secret intelligence facility. Places like Joint Defense Facility Pine Gap as an example. A US and Australian satellite surveillance base 18 kilometers southwest of the town of Alice Springs, Northern Territory, Australia. This base is a crucial facility for the United States monitoring of Asia, and they make very sure that basically no images of the site get out there. Obviously there are images, and there's also a TV show that is set in the facility, but obviously the show speculates about the actual goings on because there are no photos that make it out of the facility for fear of having the technological capabilities of the surveillance base leaked to enemy powers. Even its location in the smack dab middle of Australia makes it too remote for spy ships passing in international waters to intercept the signals. While you can know what it looks like, people like you and me are very unlikely to ever know what it looks like on the inside. Number 6, Aoi Anagrio Base. I have got another military base for you here. Google Earth is a wondrous thing. You can find just the silliest stuff on there, you can check out your childhood home, and you can see landmarks from across the globe from the safety and comfort of your home. But one thing you can't do is take a look at the Greek Aoi Anagroi military base in central Athens. While other military bases are actually visible on Google Earth, the Greek government went an extra length by having any Google Earth images of this base blurred out. It's kind of strange to me because if you look at the images of the base, almost every single building is still visible, but obviously you can't see exactly what those buildings are used for, and maybe that's the point, because the base's operational capacity is also a tightly guarded secret. It's apparently supposed to be a training facility, but others have speculated that it's where Greek military command is situated. Number 5, Iranian missile failure. Back in 2019, an Iranian missile test launch went incredibly wrong, destroying the facility where the launch took place. Enjoying the failure a bit more than you might suspect, President Trump shared a satellite surveillance image of the site on Twitter. An incredibly sharp satellite image, and that was the problem. Satellites are the best way to spy on other countries, and so the capabilities of those satellites are kept incredibly secret to avoid other countries developing countermeasures for this form of espionage. For example, using the photo shared by Trump, an astronomer was able to locate exactly which satellite was watching Iran when the test launch went downhill. USA 224, an optical reconnaissance satellite, had the capability to take a clear enough photo to determine things that are 10 centimeters wide, meaning the photo itself showed that the satellite was one of the most powerful known surveillance systems ever made. Number 4, nuclear power plants. Back in 2016, pictures taken inside some of the USA's nuclear power plants were more than a little unsettling. As most of us know, nuclear power, while relatively clean and efficient, has the potential to be a huge problem when not handled correctly. Like huge as in planet size. The incident at the Chernobyl power plant, for example, eventually spread radiation over the entire globe thanks to the way that air works. So, when the 2016 pictures were released and showed some American power plants in completely awful states of disrepair, it was more than a little worrying. The pictures were shared in an effort by workers to try and get the facilities brought back up to code. But the worst part about this is that the pictures taken at a later date show some of the plants in the exact same state they were in 2016. Unfortunately, more photos are very unlikely to be seen, as the government has made a point of being more thorough in choosing who and who can't get in. Number 3, North Korea. I could probably fill this whole list with pictures from North Korea. Most people are aware of the fact that North Korea is under one of the strictest regimes in the world. Visitors to the country are escorted everywhere they go, and that's usually only to pre-vetted locations. Most trips try their best to avoid any areas of poverty, and there are some really weird rules about pictures. Like, for example, it's okay to take pictures of statues of Kim, but not okay to take pictures of the statues from the rear. It's odd, but despite the regime's best efforts to limit documentation and pictures being leaked, a few have made it out thanks to crafty photographers. Looking through an album posted online, there are pictures of crowds of soldiers, pictures of kids on computers but with no electricity, soldiers helping on farms, people collecting grass for food, kids playing on almost empty streets, a subway tunnel, and an unfinished painting, and every single one of those photos are illegal. And they aren't the worst of the bunch by any stretch of the imagination. Unfortunately, the photographer who took them has been banned from from returning to North Korea once they realized that these pictures had made it onto the internet. Number 2. Mexican Asylum Plan. During a press conference in June of 2019, Trump was speaking about a deal struck with the Mexican government that would avoid extra tariffs in order to make managing immigrants easier. It's by no means the biggest of security fumbles, but during the conference, Trump was waving around the folded and signed agreement just to show that it was indeed in the works. Now the problem came thanks to the sun. You see, it was a real sunny day in June 2019 when this conference was held, and so it illuminated through the paper, and all the words of the confidential in the works agreement were visible for all to see, especially a photographer with a particularly high resolution camera. With the photo he captured, every single word in the document was visible and readable. It's not like this document would affect many people or anything. I guess the unsettling part is more the fact that this even happened in the first place. Number 1. The Xinjiang internment camps. Heading back to both China and Google Maps for our number 1 spot is the Xinjiang internment camps. Operated by the government and the Chinese Communist Party Provincial Standing Committee, Human Rights Watch say that these camps are and have been used to indoctrinate and other Muslims since 2017, and the camps have been criticized by the governments of many countries and human rights organizations for alleged human rights violations. The camps are reportedly operated outside the Chinese legal system, with many people being interred without a trial and with no actual charges. Local authorities are reportedly holding hundreds of thousands of in these camps, as well as members of other ethnic minority groups in China, in order to apparently counter extremism and to, quote, promote social integration. With all that, it's not really surprising that the area of the internment camps has been partly replaced with plain light gray tiles on Baidu Maps and completely blurred in Google Maps, and many countries have stood in opposition to the rounding up of at these camps.
Number 10. Mount Pony. In 1969, the Federal Reserve built a 400-foot-long bunker in Virginia with steel reinforced concrete over a foot thick. It is also covered by multiple feet of dirt and surrounded by fences and guard posts. The computers within the facility are the central node for all American electric money transfers. Until the 1990s, it also served as an extra government facility. For many years after its creation, it stored around $1 billion to rebuild the American economy if it ever fell to a nuclear attack. Currently, it stores the archive of movies from the Library of Congress, but because of it being hardened against nuclear attack, many people believe that the facility is sitting ready to be used in a time of need. The government tries to prevent any photos of the facility being placed online, as having the layout of the facility become public knowledge would remove any secrecy and advantage in the future. Only a few photos of it can be found online, and they honestly look straight out of the back rooms. Number 9. Maid of Harlech. While secret government facilities are one thing, it can be hard to believe that it's illegal to photograph something that you might just stumble upon on an afternoon walk. A plane that was nicknamed the Maid of Harlech crashed off the coast of Wales back in September of 1942. The pilot lost control during a training exercise and the plane crashed, though the pilot did walk away in pretty good shape. The plane is under around 2 meters of water and only becomes visible when the tide conditions are just right. The wreckage has never moved in all this time, and while its actual location is kept under wraps, it is in a public area that we assume anybody can access. However, you may find yourself in some legal trouble if you saw it and try to take a photo of it. The Protection of Military Remains Act prevents the location of any military remains being publicly shared, so any photos of the plane that give away its location are quickly removed from the internet and are not allowed to be seen. Number 8. Tiananmen Square. While this image is not forbidden for the majority of us to look at, it is forbidden for around 1.5 billion people. In 1989, student-led demonstrations in support of democracy took place in Tiananmen Square in China, the protesters attempting to stop military movement on the location. The government of China then declared martial law, and they used their military alongside massive tanks to run down any protesters that tried to remain in the square. Because of the horrific nature of the event, the
Chinese government has attempted to cover up the fact that the event in 1989 ever happened. Every year on the anniversary, they undertake a massive censorship campaign to ensure that nobody is talking about the event. Many people in the country have no idea that it ever even happened. But we have access to one of the most infamous images from the event, a protester standing in front of an advancing tank. While we can view it whenever we like, people in China are strictly punished if they ever even speak of what happened. Number 7. North Korea. Similarly to the censorship that takes place in China, North Korea often covers up the reality of what goes on in their country. But while they do hide it from their own citizens, they also hide it from any outsiders who may try to get a peek at how the country operates. Information going in and out of the country is strictly controlled to maintain their image, so if you ever want to visit, you'll probably have a pretty difficult time. Anyone who wants to enter the country must be accompanied by an escort, and you are only allowed to see pre-approved parts of the country, which are typically staged in order to look much better than the reality. While you may be allowed to photograph these areas, photographs of anything else will be destroyed and could land you in pretty serious trouble. The main thing they want to avoid anyone seeing is the major poverty in the country, with most families actually undertaking very hard labor jobs. There are also other rules, like how you are not allowed to photograph a statue from behind. So if you do manage to get one of these pictures, you're very lucky and very brave. Number 6. Iranian missile launch. One of the main things that governments all across the world like to cover up is their military power. They don't want you to know just how much power they're packing until it's already too late. In 2019, the Iranian government was conducting a missile test launch that went terribly wrong. It resulted in a large explosion that destroyed the whole facility they were operating out of. This occurred when tensions between Iran and the rest of the world were at an all-time high. So Donald Trump, of course, tweeted out a satellite image of the testing site. While it may seem like a normal picture, the United States military became furious and wished that the photo had never been released. This is because of just how clear it is. They didn't want people knowing the extent of just how powerful their satellite cameras are. From the image alone, people were able to find out the location and name of the satellite that took the photo. The government attempted to redact the image and prevent any more people from seeing it, but it was on Twitter and it was already too late. Number 5. Area 51. Area 51, the infamous government base in Nevada, was not even publicly confirmed by the government to exist until 2013. Honestly, way more recently than I thought it was. They stated that it was a military testing site, but a majority of the public believe that it's home to aliens and all evidence thereof. Because of the maintained secrecy surrounding the base, you are not allowed to fly in their airspace, and any pictures of the facility are pretty strictly prohibited. However, in 2020, one pilot managed to lie their way into getting the most up-close and clear footage of the facility like ever. In 2020, the private pilot named Gabriel managed to gain access to restricted airspace by telling them he just wanted to continue his quick route to the airport, them not knowing he was equipped with his GoPro to capture footage of the secret facility. He states how he didn't see any activity around the base, but we are fortunate enough to have the images that show even more of the base's layout, while the government is probably not too happy about the fact that this footage even exists. Number 4. Ayi Arnagari. It is a military base in Greece that they seem fully determined to cover up and prevent anyone from knowing anything about it. While you can use Google Earth to see an aerial image of just about anywhere on the planet, there are a few areas that are blurred from your view, and this military base is one of them. It's located in central Athens, and while you can see the building that surrounds it, the full complex is completely pixelated and blurred out. Basically, all images and information about the facility is kept under wraps by the government. Some people believe that it's a military training facility for new recruits, but could also be their military command headquarters. Photos from ground level or of anyone entering or exiting the facility are strictly prohibited. Number 3. Pine Gap. The United States government has multiple facilities that are used for collecting and storing secret intelligence. The Pentagon is probably the most well-known one. However, how publicly known the Pentagon is could be on purpose to distract from the other intelligence facilities that they're trying to hide from the public. One lesser-known one is the Pine Gap surveillance facility that is located in Australia, a crucial base for the United States surveillance of Asia. Because of its importance, they do everything they can to prevent any images of the base making it into into public hands. This is because they don't want any information of its layout, operations, or abilities to be known by enemy states and the people that they are collecting information on. Unfortunately for them, it is still possible for the public to actually get pretty close to it, so there are a few images that can be found of the outside. Number 2. X-37 space plane. The United States military is constantly testing and experimenting with new things, and one of the main things that they have tried to improve in the past is military air travel. Obviously, they wouldn't want any information about these new things to get leaked, with the fear it may end up in enemy hands. One of their most secretive designs ever was the X-37 space plane, and it landed at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, the government attempting to prevent any images of this event being leaked. It's an autonomously piloted space plane and was landing there after completing a 2-year mission in orbit, 2 of them apparently being in service. While we do have pictures of what it looks like, its purpose and what technology and capabilities it has remains under wraps. Because of how secretive the government has been with this potential new spy plane, the images that we do have of it are pretty rare, and they're not too happy about the fact that we have them. Number 1. Leaked military hardware. The United States government aren't the only ones who have had leaks of experimental military equipment. The Chinese military also had a similar situation occur, except they accidentally leaked it all on their own. In their magazine titled Modern Ships, they included an image of the new H-6N bomber. While it was purposeful to show off the ship, they didn't intend to show off the new design of the large projectile attached to the bottom of it, experts believing it was built to help with China's territory disputes. As soon as they realized what they'd done, the publishers retracted the image, but it was too late and it was already out there. So they tried to claim it was a computer-generated error, but more pictures leaked online of the actual jet in operation, matching the image in the magazine. The images hit the internet and they lost all hopes of trying to cover it up.